Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, 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 babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. What's up, Callow?
What's up, Bram? You ready for a cut down talk?
Yeah. Give me a second. I forgot to turn on my light. Hold on a second there. Hold on there, hi.
Oh man.
Oh, God. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right, what's up? How you doing?
I am good. I'm good. It's back to being swampy weather today.
Oh, here we go, man. How much do we have to go through? The whole thing? You think we got to do the whole thing? I think we got to do the whole thing, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Okay, let's do the whole thing. Initial 53, and I keep using the word initial because they do. They do. Dan Quinn has been more than open about this from the get-go, and I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. 3 to 5 guys are not on this team right now. And so I'll go through some of the names that popped up yesterday that I think are possible for this team, but I didn't see a lot, actually. I didn't see a lot, and that's actually not unusual. Typically, teams try to trade the guys that they think have any kind of value, including this team, who reportedly were trying to shop Cole Turner, Ricky Stromberg, and potentially John Ridgway. And my gut says maybe Ridgway or Mathis, but they ended up not getting deals for any of them. So they waived Stromberg, they waived Turner, and then they kept Ridgway and Mathis, to which I would say, let's see how that one plays out, because I don't know that they end up keeping both. The Browns did this with their quarterbacks. They made it clear that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be their backup, but they still have 2 other quarterbacks, including Jameis Winston, and they were trying to get a trade for him yesterday, and apparently it didn't happen, so they just didn't cut him. So I think there's a little bit of that going on here with Washington too. And so I think this is fluid for, I'd say, at least the next couple of days after waivers clear and all that stuff. Let's see if they pick anybody up off of the group that is already out there. And then a couple more moves could happen. So let's see what happens here.
I think the chaoticness of yesterday too, you also don't know who also has an offensive lineman or a cornerback that is then also looking for a D tackle. Like, there's so much chaos with the moving rosters. Yeah. All you need to do is find a dance partner here. And that's what I think they're actually waiting for, is to say, hey, you might need this position. We need that one. Let's make a swap here. I was going to say, I feel like we used to see this all the time when the rosters used to have the cut downs as the weeks went by. Remember, you would see those swaps where a team would trade a backup corner for a backup lineman or something like that. I think now it's just one giant cut, though. You just don't see it that often, and nobody can really talk to each other as fast as they used to.
Yes. So I don't think we're done here, and I'll be interested to see what happens today, because they're going to announce the practice squad at 1. And then again, they have the second choice in the waivers. So I anticipate that a couple of guys are coming here, off of people that were, because they've got second choice of the board. So we'll have to see who that is, but I got to assume that that's going to happen. And then maybe there's some re-engaged talks, and we'll see. Their roster is a little deep at certain spots, safety and defensive tackle. And I'll get to safety in a minute, but defensive tackle specifically. And I think part of that is, and it does feel like there's some redundancy in position. And I think they feel like they have an asset in either Ridgway or Mathis, and that's why they're waiting there on that. But we'll see, like maybe they both make the team and it just moves forward like that. We'll have to see. All right, let me go through position groups. Receiver. So I lumped Kaz Allen into this because he had been one for a long time. And then recently, all of a sudden, they were kind of calling him a running back. And he had these prolific records in high school, and they tried him out at running back in the preseason games, and they gave him a few carries and a couple gadget plays. And then they really profiled him on punt return. And they really wanted him to pop on punt return. And that didn't really happen. And I think part of moving him to the running back position, in the same way that I think part of the reason why they started calling Dominique Hampton a linebacker, was they're so deep at safety, it was going to be hard to keep him as a safety. They had to find a space for him. And in the case of receiver, Allen is in a spot where it's deep. And I think they were looking for something at running back to pop. And I think what they did yesterday tells you everything they need to know. And while I've been kind of like waiting for this to happen. I think there's another running back out there that they're looking for. They haven't found the explosive player behind Robinson and Eckler that I think they're looking for to use situationally. And I think they were hoping Allen would be that. And it just didn't happen in the preseason. I don't think the fumble helped. And on punt returns, some of this is circumstance. You have to get returns to have an opportunity to return, but he never really popped one. I think they wanted this. They were so dying for him to just do something to blow their minds to give the reason to do this. I still think he ends up on the practice squad. We'll see, but that's why I believe he got waived yesterday. It just never happened in preseason the way, and they gave him a million chances to do it.
I was going to say, Kaz Allen, I think, is indicative of what this coaching staff has been trying to tell us all summer, is that they don't know what they have in some of these guys, and that they know they're not going to fix this in one off season. And I think this is that situation where they go, we don't have a guy. We see potential in this guy. Let's see what he's got. They gave him the chance, and it ended up not working out, and they cut him anyways. I think this is literally the microcosm of what this whole offseason has been, is let's see what we've got in some of these guys. And this one just didn't work out. And I think they're just going to find an athlete, whether it's a wide receiver or a running back. Like, I think they're going to try to find that kind of gadget guy. I don't know who that's going to be, but I look for them to just sign the fastest guy off the waiver wire. I think it's what's going to happen.
I think they've been kind of looking for explosiveness. They're outwardly saying it. I think that they know. I think they like the skill position group that they have, but I think they know that they're missing this one or two guys that can pop off a big play here and there, and they're hoping that either Allen or Wiley would become that. Because of the receivers they kept, because they leaned on experience here, Pringle for kick returns, Crowder for punt returns, a lot of experience across the board outside of McCaffrey. Zacchaeus has been around the league for a while. Diami's in year 4. I'm not surprised that Tinsley and Tremaine, who didn't really pop in the games. Tremaine had great practices and had all these moments that I'm not surprised that's the way they went. So that's where the receivers are. With the running backs, I'll just go back to, I thought Michael Wiley would make the team in the end. They ended up sticking with a veteran, McNichols, who maybe they trust a little bit more. I'd have to ask them, because Wiley had a couple great moments in the preseason games, seemed to flash some of that speed that they're talking about, but I also didn't see with him this kind of electric explosiveness that I think they're looking for. I think he's a heavy candidate to come back to the practice squad, and I still honestly do believe that they're probably looking for a gadget player, a speed player, as you put it, an explosive player that's just out on the market, that's looking for a second chance. And that's what they're in the market for. So I felt this way for about a week or two. I don't think they have running back 3 or the gadget guy or the situational guy. And maybe they'll find him this year and maybe they won't.
Yeah, I think that's prime candidate of what they're looking for besides the positions of need. That's the next one on the list, whoever the athlete's going to be, whether that's running back or at wide receiver.
Yeah. All right. Tight ends were interesting. So the reporting came out that they were trying to move Cole Turner. The top 3 were locks. Zach Ertz, who more and more I'm starting to think might be worth a flyer in your fantasy drafts because he might get a lot of targets this year. It's starting to feel that way a little bit. Ertz, Sinnott, obviously, and Bates, who might as well be a mobile offensive lineman. Like, those guys were locks to make this team. So the only real question to me was, were they keeping 3 or 4? They ended up keeping 4. I think in the case of Colson Yankoff, there's a couple things here. One, if they wanted to release him and put him on the practice squad, I don't everybody seems to think oh, you're going to lose these guys. I didn't have that fear with him, and I don't have fear with that most years. I think Cole Turner is in all likelihood going to get picked up. I would guess that he would. With Yankoff, I'd be surprised. But this is one of those classic, the staff loves him. We may not see what they see, and I certainly haven't in the games or in practice yet. He doesn't stand out that way to me yet. And some of the others, like Logan Paulson, who I talk to all the time and is watching the film all the time, raves about him, talks about him on special teams. And he's just an effort guy and brings it. That's like the DQ thing. They want guys that are like this, energetic, bring it. I just haven't seen it manifest in the games or the practices. So all along, I kind of felt like, well, if they keep 4, they could always get this guy back on the practice squad and keep developing him. They didn't do that. And this is like the classic. We see this every year with certain staffs. They get somebody they like, and they just like them. And I may not see exactly what they like, but they do. And This is example one of that for Peters and Quinn, because him making the 53-man roster just screams to me they just like this guy and they just believe that he's going to be a contributor at some point.
I think it was Jay. It was always Ryan Grant. Like somehow Ryan Grant was always on the roster because they just liked his effort. He was a solid wide receiver. Yankoff, to me, actually, I'm going to go one step further. You can agree or disagree with me if you want. We talked about it yesterday, right? How Kingsbury has basically said without saying they're going to really rely on the run. Well, I've also said we're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets. So if 2 starting tight ends are really what you need, well, you're going to need 2 backups too. And not to say that Yankoff's going to be out there a ton, but you need to have another one on the roster just in case. And I think what this actually did to me was confirm the tell of like, they're going to go with some big personnel packages often and early. I don't know how long it's going to last this year, but I think the reason they're taking 4 tight ends is because they're going to actually need him in case someone goes down.
In the case of Turner, I was like, I looked at him and I'm like, and I agree they should have tried to move him because I believe he will be picked up on waivers. He's a big target. He can catch the ball, but for them, he's a classic tweener player. He really is a receiver, but he's obviously not fast enough to be a receiver, and he doesn't block well enough or is mobile enough to be part of the run game. So that's where Yankoff, and I think Sinnott should shine here. They keep calling Sinnott like he's going to be like Juszczyk. I believe that. Like he could totally catch the ball and make plays down the field, but I have a feeling you're going to see him moving around in the backfield and used almost like a fullback. And I think they're kind of viewing tight end that way here. Ertz is a classic receiving tight end. Bates is a classic blocking tight end. In Sinnott and Yankoff, they have these mobile parts where they could hand it off to these guys every once in a while. They could throw to these guys, and they are mobile, movable parts that are lead blockers too. So that's why I think they see in all of that. And I don't think Turner kind of fit that, but I understand. But without like a ton of explosiveness, not that he would have added to it, him being a pretty good receiver down the field, I thought had to be something you had to think about with him.
I was going to say, I think with Turner, he kind of fell into an unfortunate category. He didn't do any of the things better than those guys did, like by themselves. Like Sinnott catches the ball, I think, better than he did. Ertz probably is a better all-around, more tight end. And then Bates is a better blocker than him. Like he kind of unfortunately just is good at all of those things, but not great at any of them like all the other tight ends are. So
Bates to me, Bates and Cosme to me are candidates to extend. Cosme for sure. Yeah. And Bates, I think so too. And as a blocking tight end, it's not going to cost you a lot down the road, but he is exemplary as a blocking tight end and a guy who can catch the ball down the field. And if you actually see him in person, he's kind of built like an offensive lineman that moves like differently than most of them. So like he's somebody I see here long-term personally. And then Sinnott obviously is the draft pick. And then I guess we'll see with Ertz. What will be interesting down the road is this, like Turner is not as big a version, but is more closer to Ertz, which is a receiving tight end than a blocking tight end. And Ertz obviously isn't going to be playing very long, whether it's beyond this year or not. I guess we'll just have to see. Who's his replacement? Is that Sinnott? I don't know. So we'll have to just kind of see how that kind of materializes over the next year or two. All right, let's get to what I think was probably the biggest surprise of the day. And there really weren't many of them. I think I landed on this yesterday when we were talking about it. I didn't expect a big surprise. Like you just kind of look around the roster and you go, what's going to be the big name that really shocks you? And I didn't really see one coming. So I guess KJ Henry falls in that category of probably the biggest surprise, albeit I think anybody who's sitting there going, I'm shocked, I don't think you're not doing the math of like what the roster looked like. I thought he would make the team for sure. I was surprised to see his name pop up, but once they kept Javonte Jean-Baptiste, well, now you're just out of numbers. Like I kind of figured him to get waived and go to the practice squad, but that's not how they saw it. Once he made it, well, like Jones was going to be in trouble if that was going to happen for sure. And KJ Henry was going to be in big trouble if that happened for sure. And as we've kind of talked about for the last couple of weeks, I never thought they were cutting Jamin Davis. Like I never, ever thought that was like in the first part of camp, I was going, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. And I think he's going to have to really show something on the defensive line and show like it's one thing that he wants to do it and he's into it and he's taking the coaching and he wants to do this like really badly, but you got to be able to do it. And if he doesn't show that he's able to do it, well, then you have to make a choice with him. The last couple of weeks, I've seen enough, heard enough, and know what the coaches think of him to know he wasn't getting released. And they're also, because he's a former first-round pick, there's value attached to him and compensatory pick if he were to leave after this season. So they would have to take a trade for him to release him. So for all of those reasons, I never thought he was going anywhere. So in the end, I thought it was going to be KJ Henry over Jean-Baptiste and Jean-Baptiste to the practice squad. I have that backwards. And I guess we'll just see with KJ Henry, like Cole Turner, I would say, I do think they risk really losing him. I do think he will probably get claimed. Or of the players they put out there, Stromberg, KJ Henry, Cole Turner, in no particular order, are the ones that if they wanted to bring back, they're risking losing. And KJ Henry may be at the top of the list of that because he's a young pass rusher who's shown stuff on film in the regular season and in the preseason this year. Good character, great school, tons of experience, captain, all those reasons why he was drafted in the first place. So I expect to see him somewhere else, unfortunately, today.
He's also one of those guys, though, that I think probably fell into the category of, if it was close, this coaching staff and this front office don't have an attachment to him. I really think this is one of the ones.
They drafted the other guy.
Right. And so I think this one came down to, we like him, but we also don't have any connection with him. And I'm sure you're going to touch on once we get to the offensive line, the amount of draft picks that are left from last year, but he's one of them that this 2023 draft class is not looking great, to say it lightly.
No, 2 of the 7. That's it.
I mean, that's crazy.
In Stromberg's case, so I'd have to talk to him more about this, but he suffered a very serious injury last year. And I don't think he was particularly available in the spring, which then I think set him back a little bit. But then when we got to the summer and he was healthy, or as healthy as I guess he could be, remember, they waived him with an injury designation. So they're admitting that he still isn't 100%. They weren't even working him as backup center. And at that point, I went, I don't know how he's going to make the team now. Yeah. Like they brought in a different backup center. Like I have a hard time seeing how he's going to make the team. And so I think some of that with him is injury related to what happened a year ago, but he's out now. And they tried to move him. Braden Daniels came in as raw. And the Rivera group said that, and they said it was going to take a year. And then unfortunately got hurt. So they had to IR him for the whole year. And then he came around in the spring and they were trying him at guard and they were trying him at tackle. And he wasn't beating anybody out. He is, an impressive looking guy, like looks the part, but I guess they felt they were just better off moving on in a different direction. They got enough issues on the offensive line, so they moved on there. We already talked about Henry and Jones and, the running back situation. I failed to mention Chris Rodriguez didn't make the team. He, in my opinion, he kind of lands in a schematics discussion here, not a lack of talent, but from what I've seen and from what I gather, what they're going to value, one, they believe Brian Robinson's a lead number 1 running back in between the tackles. And I agree with that. I think he's been misutilized, well, not underutilized, probably be a better word, the last couple of years. And I don't think that's going to happen this year. I don't feel that way. I do think they're going to run the ball more. On the outside, people don't know how much they're going to run the ball. I think they're going to. But he can also catch the ball out of the backfield. Obviously, Eckler can too. Running back 3, they're looking for explosive gadget players. They can do end arounds and sneak them into a formation and run them out in the slot and all that stuff. And none of those things are Rodriguez. None of them. So I actually think that he landed in probably a bad scheme for him, that it isn't a talent thing. And you'll notice the other day when they put him out there to catch some passes, he was adjusting on the fly. The ball was kind of behind him. He doesn't have explosive, like get off the line speed. So I just think I think he'll end up somewhere too. I think he's a talented player. I just think he lands in a situation where this was probably not the right scheme for him. So there's a lot of different reasons for all this stuff. I'll look at it this way. They replaced Andre Jones, who was a 7th round pick, with a different 7th round pick that they drafted that had more experience and came from a bigger program. Let's call that a wash. Rodriguez, I think, is just, they wouldn't have picked him because he's just not a scheme fit for them. Braden Daniels was a developmental player that they didn't pick. Stromberg is coming off serious injuries, so it's just hard to know where that one is. So of all of these, the only one I'm really surprised by is KJ Henry. It just looks bad on Ron. Like it just like that's the bottom line. Like it reads like Ron was terrible at picking players, but if you really go through all of them, they're all kind of different cases. They just happen to have been drafted all in the same draft class.
I mean, Ron was terrible at picking players. Let's not.
Well, I mean, right. If they were really good, they'd be on the team. I agree with that sentiment. Right.
And what I would say too is he picked a raw offensive lineman when they needed a starting offensive lineman. Like they don't have the luxury of developing a lineman either. Like
I agree.
This is where Ron picking the players, you could get it wrong, but there was some reasoning when he picked some of these guys that was like, dude, what are you doing? So like that was one of those ones where he outthought himself. Like the Fedarian Mathis pick, like Mathis is going to end up making the team, right? But he picked Mathis because he thought Daron Payne was going to walk in free agency, and then they signed him. Like it's as usual with Ron, own goal, just an own goal every time it seems with him. He overthinks it instead of just taking something that's more solid.
Yeah, no, I agree. I should mention that too. Mathis and Ridgeway both making the team was a mild surprise to me, but I also feel like there's some other things potentially at play here.
Sure.
Because if you just look at the numbers, I just didn't see the room for both of them. That's why I was talking about this the last couple of days. I'm like, I think there's some movement here. It just doesn't feel like the roster's big enough to carry both of them, but they did today. Similarly at safety, although that's a little bit different. I want to talk about that one for a second. Dan Quinn has said this a number of times with this new kickoff rule, that he believes it's going to be different people that are set up in coverage and blocking because just of the way the thing is set up. And he kind of intimated that he thinks more players that are built like linebacker safeties, the Dominique Hamptons of the world, the Derek Forrests of the world, all that they're going to play a role in these coverage units differently than in the past. And I guess everybody's trying to figure this out on the fly. So if you're wondering, why did they keep so many safeties? That might be part of it, that they see special teams differently. They think this build and these physical attributes will be beneficial on kick returns. And I guess we'll find out, but that is one of the reasons why I think the safety group was so robust, because Defoe to me was very much in question yesterday just because of depth at the position. This might be the deepest position they had, and they had an undrafted rookie who was like clearly going to make the team. Means somebody's in trouble, but they decided, and this is where I landed on him too. I went, I just can't see them cutting him. He's just too much their profile type of player, and I think he'd get picked up in a heartbeat if they waived him. They're going to lose him. So I think they thought better of that, and they kept Derek Forrest, even though missed time and hasn't played a large role in the preseason yet.
I think looking at this safety group too, though, that's a group that kind of played themselves onto the team too. A lot of them, like we look at the cornerbacks and we think that's kind of a weak unit, but they have a bunch of safeties. I think what we're actually going to see here is some legit scheming of how do we get a bunch of these guys on the field at the same time. It's not like tight end, right, where there's 4 of them because they're going to use them, right? I think this many safeties making the team means that they're going to figure out how to use these guys, whether it is on kickoff or the return, or even if you put 2 or 3 or 4 safeties out there at the same time, on passing downs or whatever you need to do. This is one where I think they kind of just played themselves onto the team because of the talent.
Couple more people real quick. Jeff Driscoll, I think keeping 3 quarterbacks reads to me, they're not entirely sure that Marcus Mariota is healthy going into week 1. That's what it reads to me a little bit. And if they find out that he is, maybe they do a maneuvering after week 1 and put him back on the practice squad. We'll see. I know that they've liked what they've seen. Let's see what happens with Sam Hartman. I'm eager to see what happens there. I'm not surprised he was waived, and I'm not scared that someone's going to pick him up and put him on their roster. So he will end up back on their practice squad if they want him to be. And for Trace McSorley, listen, I know what happened in the fourth quarter the other day was great, but he's been here a week. These other guys have been here since the beginning of the spring. It was unlikely that he was going to supersede anybody. And the last one is Martavis Bryant, who I think I had it at 20% yesterday. I still never really believed he'd make the roster, but off of what he did in the fourth quarter of the preseason game, and because of his physical profile, which is very different than every other receiver that they have, I was willing to be open to maybe they take a shot on him. I fully expect him to be on the practice squad. I fully expect them to continue to just work with him. And if an injury pops up, potentially give him a chance to come up and play in the regular season. So I'm not surprised that that went that way either. People fall in love with these performances in the preseason, and they're sitting there scratching their head on Wiley Day or McSorley. And I'm going, guys, like, what are we talking about here? You know, like, they can retain them and keep them on the practice squad. Wiley's not going anywhere. Bryant wasn't signed by anybody through the whole offseason. It's not like someone's, I don't think, pick him up now and put him on an active roster. No, he's going to stay and he'll be on the practice squad here if that's what the team chooses to do.
I think with Bryant too, Bryant, he's shown you the effort in the second half of these preseason games, and that's fantastic. I've loved his effort, but I think they're also waiting to see, all right, let's get you on a practice squad. Let's see how well you keep practicing. Let's keep seeing that effort through this next month, because he's a veteran. He knows how this works. You play really hard and you can sneak your way onto a team. I think what they're doing here is going, all right, we like what we've seen so far. Let's see you keep it up through September, October, and then maybe make it onto the roster.
All right, I'll take a break, and I'll throw a couple names at you, see what you think about them, that they're out in the open market. Brad Washington Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Brad Washington Show, ESPN 630, the Sports. All right, let me throw a couple names at you and see what you think of these. And don't laugh when I say this first one, because how many times do we talk about they're looking for explosive players? Kadarius Toney was cut by the Chiefs. He seems to be an unserious person. Like, the Giants couldn't get away from him fast enough. And the Chiefs, and I always get really concerned. If you're on a really great team and Andy Reid's your coach and Pat Mahomes is your quarterback, and you can't stick there and you're young and talented, that's you. That is not them. So I am full on, I don't know about this idea, but look, I mean, this team is obviously looking for pop and explosive players, and he is that. So I do think we need to at least talk about him for a minute here.
I'm with you. The attitude is the first thing that is a red flag. And I think this group has to tread carefully if they do bring him in, because it is a little bit of a signal to the roster of like, we're willing to let some of this stuff bend to bring some of these guys in. That being said, that guy makes plays. I mean, we saw the punt return in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Like, they put him back there to have a spark, and it worked. And look, sometimes, like, I know I'm probably just like making the argument for like a hometown thing here, but sometimes those guys get scared and they clean up their act after they get cut again. So maybe too, like, you bring him in, of course it's going to be on a minimum deal, whatever it is. And maybe, you know, he puts his head down and goes to work because he knows this might be his last chance. And there's a little bit of a factor of, you bring him in, hey dude, you stick around, you get to play the Giants two times a year. You want to do that? So maybe there's a little bit of motivation there. I call it like a 50-50 shot they go after him, though.
I think it's 50-50 I think they have to think about it. I mean, like, so they're looking at Wiley hard. They're looking at Allen hard. They're looking for someone who can pop plays for them. This guy can do that. Now, like, I know the 8 million highlights of him doing completely unserious things too. And so, but as a fifth, sixth receiver, like, think about the bottom of their receiver room right now. Jamison Crowder is their primary punt returner, I would think. And Byron Pringle is one of their two primary kick returners, I would think. And both obviously can play receiver, but neither one of them have the explosiveness of this guy. And he is a special teams player. So I think they have to think about it. Like, I have a hard time buying that they could convince him to come to the practice squad. I could be wrong about that. Convince him to come to the practice squad here. I think somebody is going to pick him up. That's what I think, because I just think he's kind of got too much talent. And if it doesn't go well for a couple of weeks, they can always just cut him again. You know, like, you could give him this opportunity and cut him after week 2, 3, whatever. If it doesn't work out, I think this team needs to just think about him for a week or two. That's what I think.
No, I agree 100%. And I mean, look, if he were to step onto this roster and then get acclimated to the offense, he could be the third wide receiver within a week or two if it was actually, you know, a perfect world. I don't know if that would happen, but he's that good compared to what we have on this team right now. So I think you absolutely have to think about it.
Yes. A couple other names that popped up, like Noah Brown popped up, a receiver, had played in Dallas for a while. So anybody who's connected to Dallas, over the last few years is going to come up. My opinion on him is I don't think he's definitively better than the players that they have. So when you get into these discussions about should we go get somebody, I think you should get someone that you really think is definitively better than what you have. So I don't know, but we'll see what happens there. There were a couple other Dallas players. There was a corner that was let go. Any corner, any offensive lineman, any running back are the ones that I'm looking for to see that if they think they can upgrade their roster at those three position groups specifically, that's what I expect them to do.
On Noah Brown, I just don't think that's going to be a fit because of his size. He's only 6'2". I just don't see them going after him, mainly because that guy exists on the roster already. Like, I just
we got
don't
a few
see
of those.
Yeah. So I just that's when I looked at like he looked like he had a little bit of a breakout last year, but I looked at him and went, they've already got that receiver on the roster. So unless they like him more than somebody, I don't see him coming.
Yeah, the small, fast, quick receiver, we have that with Olamide Zaccheaus. So I don't see the definitive need, but they can prove me wrong today.
Sure.
We'll find out over the next couple of days. All right, let me get to a couple college football things that I want to talk about. There is a Connor Stallions documentary out, which I do want to watch, because is he going to abjectly lie about his role with Michigan, or is he going to tell the truth, or is it going to be somewhere in the middle? So I read one review of it, and it seems like it's somewhere in the middle, where he actually literally shows a game ball that was given to him by Jim Harbaugh, okay, from like a couple years ago. And then I guess he says, I did all of this on my own and they had nothing to do with it, which obviously doesn't connect any dots and feels very, very modern, gaslighty. I'll only say what I want to be true to you, and I don't care if you don't believe me or if I'm lying to your face, because it doesn't seem to matter. There's no such thing as accountability anymore. What, like, everybody's waiting for the old school way of just going, all right, I'll tell you what happened, which is just not the world we live in anymore. Like, if you did something quote unquote wrong here, and we could argue whether he did anything really wrong here, because, like, I don't know, sitting in the stands and deciphering other people's signals doesn't seem all that wrong to me, but whatever. Like, we could find out where on the scale of football morality did he break a rule, but he's clearly not going to be honest about it. Like, and I guess we're in a world now where this is how people answer questions. Even if they're wrong, they're never going to say they are. No one takes accountability for anything.
Well, that's how we've had this discussion many times over the last 4 years. It started with the Michael Jordan documentary. I'm trying to remember what that was called. The ESPN Last Dance. You and I have had this conversation many times over the years now with sports documentaries. None of them are actually like definitively putting out any new details. It's always somewhere in the middle, because if they want these guys to talk, they're not going to say everything. And so
half of those things are produced by the people that like Michael Jordan's the executive producer of The Last Dance.
Right.
I actually thought we learned more in that than I thought we would when I found out he was doing it. Like, the Derek Jeter one is not memorable because Derek Jeter was the executive producer and famously doesn't want to talk about anything to anybody.
That's right. And so I think this is just where we fall now with sports documentaries. If you want to get these guys on camera, they're not going to say everything you want, but they're going to give you something. And I guess what it lies into is you got to use the footage if you actually get the guy, so you air what they say. So.
All right, so there's that one. I'm going to watch it. I do want to watch. I don't know why. It's just like I like stupid stories, and I want to watch this one.
Have you seen, by the way, for the director of the Last Dance? Have you heard what he said? Why that documentary was so good? Like, what they unlocked with all of those guys?
No.
That these guys have done a million interviews on Michael Jordan. So like Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and everyone that has talked. He said these athletes are kids, so we handed them iPads with the highlights on them. He said, and that's what elevated the documentary to the next level. They basically said these athletes get bored of talking, but when we put the highlights out in front of them to watch, that's where we got all the gold. And I was like, wow, athletes are children. That's pretty much what I
think the other thing that they did that was really, really, really smart, I think they probably figured it out at some point. They did some interviews and went back to Jordan and showed him the interviews. And the hyper competitiveness came out in him in a very childish way. And I think that was the best part of the whole thing too. Like it was very, very, very well done, and probably only still on certain subjects scratched the surface. But I will give them credit for. And I like remember this was pandemic. It was literally the only thing on. There was no sports at the time.
Yep.
We'll give them credit for this. Like they did talk about gambling. They did talk about his dad being killed. Like they did talk, like maybe not in depth, but at least they didn't try to ignore it. Like they didn't go like, and then he was away for 2 years and then he came back. Like they didn't do that. Like they didn't try to pretend that era didn't happen. We talked about the other day, Deion refusing to answer questions from a reporter or a columnist who makes fun of him, and gets on him and basically is, I don't think he's calling him a fraud, but he's basically kind of going like, your sales pitch isn't flying right now because your team's not that good. And I think that's where he's going with it. Like you're all bluster, but there's no real basis for like what's going on here. And I'm kind of in the middle on this where I'm like, Deion went to a place hasn't won in a long time in a tough situation. And he knows that to get all the attention, he has to put his brand on the line to do it. And yeah, if they go 4-9, that sucks. But he's betting on that he can bring the type of attention and elevate the program and the players will get better around it. And so but the columnist is going after him going, this is all basically marketing. Like it isn't like there's no real program being built here. It's just marketing. And I'm not following the building of the team or no recruiting or NIL well enough to know where actually on the scale this team actually is, but no one seems to think they're any good. So it's somewhere in the middle. Anyway, he's going on defense now. And he's basically like killing people. And he said this one because Paul Finebaum went at him, which, without Saban to kick around a little bit, Finebaum's got to have other foils. And he went after him and he basically called him a baby and all this stuff. And you shouldn't shut out the press and all that stuff and made fun of him, went on and on and on. And this is what Deion said about him. He goes, I know what he's doing, and I'm proud of him that he's smart enough to understand that this generation and this thought process and the way we communicate on sports, it's different, and he's a dying breed. So what does he have to do to stay and keep up with this change? Oh, I got to go to find the big bad wolf and talk about it. So now I keep my relevancy. And I'm saying, cool, but I'm not going to help you, and I'm not going to add to you, and I'm not even going to respond because that's what you want. You want me to respond. I don't do that. I'm not going to help you come up.
So Deion has now gone full, you're a snowflake because I'm doing something wrong. That's where we're at now. Like Deion is now taking a page out of, the rights playbook because that's what it sounds like. Like, oh, I'm going to snuff out the press. And then when you bitch about it, you're the snowflake about it. I mean, am I wrong in kind of jumping to that conclusion?
There's some of it where I liked what he said there when he said, you're a dying breed, that he's saying, we're on to your game now. Your game, the Skip Bayless, a little bit Stephen A., but I don't think as much as like Skip Bayless, but Finebaum falls into this category where they're going to pick a person, they're going to pick a topic about that person, and they're going to say something extremely controversial about it and hope that it starts a news cycle, not get into a news cycle, starts a news cycle. And I like what Deion said. I'm not going to respond to it because that's what you want me to do. If I respond directly to you, it only elevates what you said and makes it more important. If I ignore you, it loses the relevancy. We're having game-changing moments today, okay? So here's Connor Stallions, who's half admitting he did what he did, but not half admitting he did what he did. And Jim Harbaugh a couple of weeks ago, who pretended like he knew nothing about these things that occurred in the past, but we all know his abject lies. And I think, and we're all just on to their game of they're just going to lie, or they're just like, and that's just the way it is. That's how they communicate. And here's Deion saying, sports fans are on to this, and they may or may not in the next generation of communication care about the people who do this, which is try to generate news cycles by coming after high-profile people like myself and saying things about what we do. At the same time, that's all Deion's doing to try to build up Colorado. He is playing the same marketing game. Like, it's not like he took over Alabama for Nick Saban. He took over a decrepit program, and he's leaning on, I'm Deion. This is how I do things. Y'all want to be me, bling, bling. And like, so they're both kind of true. They're both kind of right. And I think what's happening here is like the reporters in Colorado are going, this is all BS. Like, it's not even a real program. This is just BS. Finebaum's calling it out to get himself in this, and Deion's stuck in the middle trying to kind of defend himself, not help the hot takers, be his own personal brand machine. We're in a weird spot here with this one. Real weird.
I think, though, the problem is Deion has a expiration date. Like, he's not going to last here forever. Like, we know this is probably going to come to a head at some point. It could be 2 years from now. It could be.
Does, but I don't know that he's right about that part.
Yeah, but here's the other thing, and I mentioned this yesterday. Deion's the one that set up the circus tent and said, come see the show. And so why are you mad that you're getting all of this attention? You asked for this. This is how you want to build your program up. By the way, that columnist, he went on with Unsportsmanlike yesterday and went full defense, and he blasted the program, and he did it in a way that didn't sound bitter. Like, this wasn't just I hate the program because they're blocking me from asking questions. He literally said out loud, they're all afraid of him. So, of course, when he said, I don't want that guy to ask questions, everyone jumps and says, okay, he can't ask questions anymore. He said it's in entirety that he basically runs everything over there now, which we're not shocked at, but basically said everyone's afraid of him. So this is how this is starting to roll now. The whole program is getting behind him because they're afraid to stand up to him and say, dude, this is wrong. And so this is the world we live in now, where if you don't like something that somebody says, you ban them, essentially. And that's, like, to me, it's the worst part. And this is what I don't really understand, though, with Deion. They're all standing up to you because this is kind of a step too far. So don't lump this in with all of your other stuff.
Right.
I do think Finebaum, yes, goes off. And he went off on Deion in the offseason earlier. We played that clip. But, like, I think Deion should realize journalists are going off on this because it's different. Like, this is one that you don't mess with. Like, you don't have to like a reporter, but banning them from asking questions in 2024, like, what are you doing, man? Like, what are you doing?
I agree. You know, in the old days of this show, when it was 3 hours, I'd talk about this for an hour. But now that we're 45 minutes, I won't. So maybe we'll revisit this tomorrow, because I do want to send some well wishes to my friend John Walton next. Very much the show. He's been 6:30 in Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Very much the show. ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. I don't like to end on disturbing things, so I'm going to do this one first, and I'll get to the better stuff last. But I guess you knew about this because you produced the Capitals games with John Walton. I didn't know. He didn't tell me, and I found out via social media posts yesterday that the radio voice of the Caps, John Walton, found out not that long ago that he has colon cancer, and he's undergoing surgery, and said in his post they're taking out 8 to 10 inches of his colon, and that the doctors, at least initially, have told him his prognosis is pretty good, and that he was very positive in the post that he'll be calling the Caps games this fall and he'll be back on his feet as soon as possible. So I just want to, we'll let you speak, because I think you know more about whatever you want to share. I think you know more about what's going on here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much said it. Like, John had spoken to me before he posted anything and just had given me a heads up, and, you know, even reassured me that, like, things should be fine after the surgery. Said it'll take him a little bit to get back on his feet, but for the most part should be okay. And, you know, using this platform and using his platform, he said, whenever you're 45, go get that test, because that is something that they caught. Hopefully everything's going to be okay. And just, I think it's worth reiterating that when you are, you know, in your 40s, go get that test, because it's going to save his life.
Yep. So I just want to publicly just send some well wishes to my friend John Walton. Tell you I enjoy our annual pizza dinner every year. We're about a month or two away from that. So hopefully you're back up, ready to go. If the doctors let you eat pizza, let me know. If we've got to eat kale, because that's what they tell you got to do, we'll do that. Whatever it is fine. And I hope to hear you back calling the Caps games this fall. And I hope you're feeling great. And I hope that they get out whatever they need to get out. And, you know, this stuff can be a long road to recovery. And I hope that's not the case for you. So I'm just sending well wishes to John Walton and everybody who watches the show, listen to the show. Hopefully send him some notes of appreciation today. because it's going to be a rough day for him.
Yep.
So I wish him the best with all of that. All right. A couple things for you. You went to the Nats game yesterday, so you got history. Dylan Cruz first hit. You got to actually witness that.
Oh, I thought you were going to say history. Patrick Corbin 6 scoreless against the Yankees.
I made this for you. Look.
Yeah.
Callow loves Patrick Corbin. Yes.
Well, that's what you're going to go with. No, I mean, it was a great game. I was sitting with a lot of Yankees fans, so I got a little boisterous, probably 6th, 7th inning of like, what are you guys doing? You're letting Patrick Corbin carve you up. They're calling Judge the MVP, and I'm going, when's the last World Series you've won? So there's a lot of good banter that was going on with the Bing Bongs last night when it came down to it. But no, Cruz, that was my first time seeing Cruz in person. He's the real deal. Like his approach at the plate, how fast he is. He stole third base in one of his base running paths. So he's looking like legit. So I look at him and Wood, and all of a sudden it's kind of, I see it now. I'm starting to see it, but it was really good. And hey, Corbin mowed them down last night too. I got to give him a little bit of props too. That's two good games in a row for Patrick Corbin. I don't know when.
Well, he's got a contract coming up, Mike.
Yeah, that's right.
He's got a contract coming up.
Yep. Yeah. Well aware.
6 innings, 2 hits, no earned runs. Good for him. How about that? You saw his best start since the World Series year. How about that?
I mean, it's funny enough that it happened against Garrett Cole too. That he actually pitched against him. So,
and you got the Dylan Cruz hit, and then tonight, Clash of the Titans continues. O's Dodgers, hon. O's won last night. So I don't know. This could be World Series preview. We'll see.
I don't know if you've kind of like paid attention to what all the baseball world has said. I know you've been in training camp mode, but like Buster Olney, Tim Kurkjian, they've all kind of said there's a group of contenders and they all have something wrong with them. So now that we know that the O's are not the only ones that have a bunch of bullpen problems, everybody has problems. Like the table is going to be wide open in the playoffs this year. So just know Orioles fans are not the only ones bitching about, their record being 20 wins over 500. Everybody's panicking. That's a contender these days.
You can check that. I'll be on the air tonight, right? Those Dodgers late tonight.
9:30 pre, 10 o'clock first pitch.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to y'all tomorrow. Brave Watch the Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.